Good morning, everybody. It's Kalini Kent here on World Mental Health Day. This is a really important day, I think, for us all to acknowledge and recognise the challenges that we all face with mental health. And I've got today a series of some amazing people who are going to share their own personal stories. I think as a mental health first aider, I also want to share the fact that I do think mental health is such an important thing to recognise and take away the stigma so that we can actually keep talking about it. Mental health is a continuum, and so we could all ourselves find ourselves at some point on different points of the continuum, whether it be from mild anxiety to generalized anxiety disorder, or to something more impactful and long lasting. So I think it's really important for us to raise awareness, support each other, and find strategies to actually overcome. Now, the first person I've got on today is the lovely Naomi Gilmour, who I've known for a while. And she's an incredible lady, and she's going to be sharing her story of being a survivor of suicide and bereavement. So I would love to welcome into the studio for her to tell her and share her story, Naomi.
Good morning.
Good morning, Naomi. It's so good to have you here. How are you this morning, my dear?
I'm good this morning. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy because building awareness around mental health and kind of suicide prevention feeds my soul. It makes me happy. I feel that's part of my mission on this planet. So, I talk about it 365 days of the year. But I do believe these days, for people that kind of don't understand some of the stigmas and things surrounding mental health, are great for people to be able to kind of feel that access to connect on what it's all about.
Absolutely. And I think that's why what we want to do is encourage anybody as well who wants to actually ask any questions of us. And also, good morning, Sue Quinton. Lovely to see you. Thank you. So if you'd like to ask any questions or leave any comments in the chat, please feel free to do so. In order for your name to show with StreamYard, though, so that it's not just saying a Facebook user, you do need to give StreamYard permission, but it would be lovely to have your feedback and do get involved. Good morning, Irene. It's lovely to see you here as well. So Naomi, should we start first of all by saying who you are? Because you have quite a lot of hats, but you are an incredible person with websites, and that's actually how I got to know you, isn't it?
It is. Thank you, Kalini. Yes. So I currently, my kind of day job hat, if you like, is web design and online marketing mentoring. So I've been self-employed for 20 years now. Always built my own websites, always worked with kind of online tech and all that kind of stuff. So I do love a bit of tech. I'm quite a geek, although people say I don't look like a geek, which I'm quite thankful for.
Definitely don't.
But I work with small businesses really to help them be successful online. And I do that through bespoke web design, but also ready-made websites, which is how we obviously met, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and you're quite a good hat. But it's one of your hats, isn't it? So in fact, we ought to have a load of hats here today. And in fact, because in the time I've known you, you are a very kind, caring person, and you actually are very helpful. And in fact, the lovely title of Happy Heart Web Design, we're going to get onto that a little bit, and about the name change, because you actually started as a different name, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So I've been doing this business now for 8-9 years, and I used to be called Branching Out, and I actually used to focus more on social media training. I used to have a mini that was all logoed up that I used to razz around Cheshire, training people on social media and doing social media management. But really, I started to understand how important your website was in all of your online mechanisms, and really focus on that. So I still do all the online stuff, but I very much focus on the core, which I say the website's your heart center of your business online. Yeah, that's one of the reasons for the name change. We'll come to that in a minute.
You are a bit of an entrepreneur anyway, aren't you? Because I think you've said to me you're an entrepreneur for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And you've had various businesses, haven't you? Which in fact is probably the beginning of sort of like some of the story, isn't it? About and your journey and what we're going to share with everybody today.
Yeah, definitely.
So what was the first business that you had? Because it was quite successful, wasn't it?
So actually my first business, my background's actually in hotel and catering management, would you believe? But my first business was, I used to be a national sales manager for Radisson Hotels and Thistle Hotels, Forte and all of that kind of stuff. So I actually set up a hotel booking agency, was my first business, started with offices, staff, all of that kind of thing. And then probably about 4 years in, really started to, once I've made that business really successful, I'd started to kind of think, what is it what feeds my soul? What is it I want to do? And I always loved home interiors, but I was never good enough at art to be able to do interior design. So I opened an interiors shop. First one was in Cheadle, actually. So I kind of sold product. That business grew massively. So when I closed my shops, I kind of closed one business, and then I reinvented myself, which is one of the curveballs and the roller coasters that I went through in life. Reinvented myself online and was one of the first sellers on eBay. And I took that business up to, in 2009, we turned over just £7,000 short of £1 million. I was importing from China. We had big warehouses in Cheadle and everything, and it was incredible. It grew really, really quickly. And then there's another story to be told, the other side of that, really, which led me to where I am kind of today. So we had some problems with shipments in China, really bad weather in the UK. I kind of had supply arriving and wasn't selling, and then had to clear it all off. So I could talk all day about the lessons learned around all of that. So I had 8 staff at that point. I'd kind of really scaled the business up. And it was fun times, but it came with some very hard lessons.
And I think this is really the beginning of sort of like the start of the trauma, which then sort of ensued, isn't it? Because you had obviously an incredibly successful business. You were married at the time. You had the 2 children, and so what you then well, there was obviously a problem with the business, and you lost that, didn't you? What happened?
So in late 2009, I was put in a position. I actually had about £100,000 worth of orders and no supply. I won't go into the detail of all of that. And I had a choice to make. So I could either carry on trading and trade it out and try and turn it around. But things had got like to a position where I knew that if I made a decision to close and to go into voluntary insolvency at that point, which was a really tough call for me to make, I could refund the people that I could refund, and that I could almost take control of being able to close down. And it was huge, because it was my baby. It was a huge amount of loss to me. I felt like a complete failure. I remember it was actually the week after I went into insolvency, Woolworths went into administration. And I remember it making me feel loads better. Because I really felt like I'd messed it all up. I literally wanted to hide away and never come out again. You know what I mean? So it makes me giggle these days that I'm so visible, because at that point I wanted to crawl into the corner, put my head and never come up for air, that type of thing. I felt like I'd let my girls down. Actually, at that point when the business went, me and my ex-husband now were going through a divorce, and I'd moved out. I was living in a rented house, and I actually got to a position where I couldn't even afford to buy any food, let alone the rent. Bailiffs came and took my car away. And I remember going from kind of like having so much money that I didn't almost know what to do with it, because I wasn't used to having this much money, to literally bailiffs taking my car away, not being able to feed my kids. My dad lent me £200 to get a food shop, and I don't even think he knows this to this day, bless him. He's too poorly for me to be able to tell him now. Well, maybe I should try and tell him one day. That I actually bought some business cards with it and set my website up. That's when I was kind of like being told to get a proper job. So my dad would be like, get a proper job, you need to get back in it. And I had one interview and then realised that I'm actually unemployable because I can't be told what to do.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? When you've got this feast and famine, which actually I think is probably a lot of what people are going through right now, isn't it? Because, well, 1 minute they've got an income and a job and finance, and then all of a sudden they're on furlough and potentially their job's going. That probably a lot of people can resonate with that feeling right now, can't they? Because it is that.
I know I'm laughing about it now because it was a long time ago, and I've been able to work through some of those really dark times. But actually, when I was in it, I remember the kids being hysterical that these men were taking the car away.
Yeah.
And I literally couldn't even get them into school the next day. I had to borrow a car off somebody. I had no, and I just sat. I remember describing it as having my soul ripped out. That's how it felt, like I had nothing. I felt like I'd failed at my marriage, failed at my business, I'd failed as a mother, and I literally sat on the kitchen floor and just broke down. It was just like there was nothing. I had nothing. But I had my babies, and I focused on all of that. And I was very blessed around those times to be connected and find people to help me through the next stage of my journey, really. And I worked with a hypnotherapist. I had hypnotherapy going through my divorce and during those times as well. And I also had counselling through my sort of relationship breakdown. And I remember some of those techniques, I still use some of those techniques and things that I learned there today, 10 years on, and I help other people use those techniques as well, where you can reframe your mindset. You can use, little reminders within yourself to change up what is going on in life, and you are responsible for that. And I think that's, I call it the old Naomi. So the old conditioned Naomi wouldn't believe that I had it all within me, whereas now I very much go within of like, I know I can do this, and I have to sometimes go very deep to find those little sparks of moving forward to the next part of the journey.
And I mean, your reframing tools are really powerful, but also there's quite a lot of other things, and we're going to touch on them, in fact, and because I think there are some really key messages we want to leave with everybody today, aren't there, about interventions and signposting and so on. We'll share that at the end, but I think also it's about the fact that you've shown a lot of resilience, because maybe we ought to touch now on the fact that you've had a very sort of like consistent period of losses. You've really been at the receiving end of loss in a huge way. And when I listened to it, when you were sharing it with me, it was quite emotional. I've brought my tissues ready because today I think it's going to be an emotional day. I think because you apart from the fact you lost your mum when you were 24, so you lost your mum. You were divorced. I think you've said you've lost your stepdad, etc. Maybe you can share. It was several key people in your life. I think
for me, it probably started quite early on, and we talked, didn't we, the other day about kind of childhood stuff. And I know that you're really passionate about the kind of working with children and actually changing some of this stuff early on of some of the experiences that we have. And I know, I dealt with a lot of loss. My children have dealt with a lot of loss as well. And I'm very mindful of that, of like how it's affected me later on in life, or how I didn't address it and didn't move forward with it, and kind of the changes that we can make. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit in a minute. But for me, like my mum and dad got divorced when I was 3. There was a period of time, actually, and I don't know whether my sisters will even tune into this or whatever, if they do, and I probably never shared this with them. There was a time, actually, when I got into my sort of early teens, sort of transition to high school, when I started to blame myself, because I was the youngest at that point, of maybe it was because of me that they kind of split up. And I used to look at other families and my my friends, where the mums and dads might be cooking roast dinner together, and I really kind of like I wanted that. So I missed that. So we did have my mum got remarried when I was 7, and I had a lovely stepdad called Patrick. He was an amazing part of my life between the ages of 7 and 15, and then they separated, and I never saw Patrick again after that day, and that did affect me for the rest of my life. I'm thankfully very blessed that we're now connected on Facebook, so I do speak to him. I know that I speak to him on Messenger, and I know that he watches kind of what I'm doing now, and I take great comfort in that. And my dad has always been in my life. My dad, in terms of our relationship, I would say it's been, so I used to see him kind of once a week. We'd go on holiday occasionally. And he's always been a really big figure in my business life. So in terms of like my success, he helped me navigate through the insolvency and kind of dealing with accounts and all of that kind of stuff that does not light my fire. So, I'm very blessed to have had him still around it in my life, but probably not in kind of like the relationship that my girls have with their dad now is quite different, because they're with him this weekend, they do lots of kind of stuff with him. And my dad is now terminally ill. He got diagnosed with a terminal illness a few years ago, and I keep meaning to, well, I'm going to write my book, and my dad will feature very, very much in my book because of kind of all of that. So that sort of led me into teens. My mum got remarried, and she'd been remarried 8 years before she died. So she died when she was 54. So for me, there was kind of a lot of change. There was a lot of not a normal, whatever normal is these days, kind of family unit. So, but we were always very sort of like, who needs a man, and we'll just get on with it, and that type of stuff. And I think that has contributed to some of the kind of loss that I've probably experienced as an adult. And I'm single now. I've lived here on my own for the last 2.5 years. But from kind of losing my mum, I was in a relationship at the time which didn't kind of work out. And then I then went on to get married after that. I have a really good relationship with my ex-husband, the girl's dad. So we've been separated now, divorced 10 years. We'll probably get on better now than we did when we were married, but there we go.
I've heard that quite a lot, actually.
Yeah. So there was kind of loss there, and obviously that was quite big because it came at the time of losing the business, and that was loss and feeling a failure. And I think any loss, whether it's loss of grief, loss of business, loss of job, you know, the people that are experiencing loss of normality, loss of seeing friends, all of that is loss, and it all triggers different grief cycles. So moving on from then, obviously I lost my brother, which we're going to talk about, I know, today. So I lost my younger brother, who's 12 years younger than me, and he died on his 31st birthday, and he died by suicide. That was a huge life. That's one that still gets, I can't talk about it, but I sometimes still get pretty emotional talking about it. It's still quite raw. So that was 4 years ago. And then literally 6 weeks after losing Nick, my dad had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. I had a family member who got diagnosed with cancer not long after, and my relationship broke down. So I've been living with somebody for 3 years. I've been with them for 3 years, been living with them for 3 years. It was my move actually to move to Congo now. And I think it was probably, on reflection, looking back, probably the grief, the real complex grief that comes with suicide, and the aftermath of that, really. But over a really quick period of time, I moved out of the family home. I literally was sofa surfing for 6 weeks with my kids, waiting for a new house. I was moving into a rented house and stuff. And literally I was transitioning all of that whilst going through Nick's inquest, my brother's inquest, and all of that kind of stuff. So in terms of trauma, it was how I navigated it. When I look back, I don't know, but I did. And we landed, and we kind of moved forward with that. And then I went on to kind of more stuff. You know, I've moved house 3 times in a few years. We've been here now for 2.5 years, so I'm feeling very settled, very grounded.
When you look at, in fact, I'd love to at this point just refer everybody to something called the Kubler-Ross change curve, because actually this was a model which was developed in the 70s by Kubler-Ross, and it was actually developed to actually handle grief, and it was showing the cycles of change. And in fact, it's a talk I've recently done, and it's about the fact that when we experience any form of change, and at the time it was grief and loss of somebody, there's first of all there's like 4 major stages to the cycle. A lot of us at the moment are going through change with loss, partly from grief from losing people through COVID, but it's also the loss of jobs, loss of their friendships, as you said. And I really love the fact that you've signposted the fact that we are losing our contact with people, which is so important for our own mental well-being and self-support structure. But I just want everybody, maybe afterwards I'll share it in the chat, about the KublerRoss change curve, because it shows the stages of grief that people go through, which is first of all immediate denial, and then you sort of like going into the emotional dip of the bottom of the curve where you're actually, you know, sort of like you're resisting it, and then eventually coming out of it, you're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. But the main problem is that why it's so much more traumatic is you've not actually had that period in between each one to recover.
Yeah. So I describe it as a tsunami.
Yeah.
I actually remember sitting in my office one day, and it was only a couple of weeks after Nick had died, and I was supporting my online community, and I was trying to, I actually did a live class. How I did it, I don't know, but I did manage to do it. But I remember just sitting I had a little garden office at the time, and thinking, I felt like I described it as like this tsunami of like sitting in an M25 pile-up, and that literally another car just kept coming, and it was just almost like the layers of it was so intense. I just had to be able to focus on one thing at a time. So it took quite a long time, obviously, because of post-mortem and all, and actually for Nick's funeral, to kind of like move through all of that, because of police investigate suicide. It's quite a difficult, it's not quite a difficult, it's a hideously difficult grief to experience, and it's a very complex grief. And I worked with a counsellor who specialised in complex grief, so specialising in grief of suicide and murder, because those two types of grief you can't pin on something. So you can't say, like, my mum died of an asthma attack. You can, as part of your grief cycle, you can pin it on, it was an asthma attack. When somebody dies by suicide, you can't get closure. You can't pin it on anything, because there's so many unanswered questions. And it's not like you see on TV where you find out an exact time of death and all of that kind of information, that you want those answers. You don't find those answers out. It took about 2 or 3 weeks for us to even discover that I was the last person to have a conversation with Nick. I didn't think I was at that point, but I was. And it comes with a tsunami of emotion, and because there's a lot of guilt attached to it, and there's a lot of blame and frustration and a real deep sadness.
I think you described it to me as well. Like when we were talking, you said that it's I think the hard thing is not knowing why at the time, isn't it? And I think it's also the fact that you then construct your own reality of what might have been the reason. You create that idea of, well, this may have been the reason, that might have been the reason. Oh, well, he probably did this, and then you're dealing with your own guilt. Should I have done more, etc.
And you go through, like, everybody. So what happens is everybody has to develop their own story. So my story, I had to develop my own story and my version of Nick's story, because my version of what happened and everything else is my version. And that might be different to his friends' versions, to his girlfriend's version, to my sister's version of whatever, because it's a very although it's a community grief, we all have our own versions of that story, because it isn't actually, you don't get that answer, if you like. So that's how I worked through it, and created that for myself.
And as you're talking about this, everybody's got their own story, and they will also put their own perceptions on the situation and the relationships. And I think it's been nice to share with everybody. You did say that your relationship with Nick was rather special, because you were the last one, and then he arrived 12 years later. And also it's the fact that you had a very close, I just can imagine it. You said he was obviously the life and soul of the party and fun loving, and you had a bit of a playful, fun relationship with him. So,
yeah, I did, definitely, sure. And I've got so many photographs of, like, every photograph that I look at, we're like larking around on it. I've got one for the last Christmas together that we had, where we've got all like props and stuff, and everyone was like, why is there so many pictures of you and Nick? And it's like, because he'd be making me cocktails and we'd be larking around, whereas actually my older sisters, there's some beautiful pictures of them, but they tend to be, you know what I mean, that we all had our own very special relationship with him, and it was always different. So my older sisters had we're all a very close family. I'm very, very blessed that I've got 2 older an older brother, and we are a close family. But yeah, I think we just Nick was the life and soul of the party anyway. He was always I think I was chatting about this the other day actually, but I think he liked to he loved to make other people happy. So he was always laughing, joking, kind of. He had a presence when he came in the room. I'm just thinking of Christmas Day. We have about 27 on Christmas Day normally, and he'd come in and he'd be organising everything and always hilarious with kind of all of his antics. So he always had stories to tell and stuff going on. And I know, I've heard lots of stories from his friends and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we all had different relationships with him. But and I think the kids as well. The kids. So this would be kind of a Christmas would be, he would buy all the kids Nerf guns, and then he would buy himself a bigger Nerf gun so that he could have a Nerf gun war and he would win, type of thing. So, and he'd be tearing around the house. So that type of uncle to have, if you like. But yeah, we all had a special relationship with him, but the dynamics were all different, I think, in that. And I think that tends to be a sibling thing anyway. Of siblings are. And I know with my daughters, they're like chalk and cheese, and they have, a really quite a lovely close relationship with the banter that goes on of stuff as well.
and also I think he also you got close as well, because he was only, I think you said he was about 12, was he, or 9, was he when you lost your mum?
He was 12 years younger than me. He was 13 when mum died. And when mum died, he stayed with my stepdad. Obviously, at 13, just devastating. We were all adults. He was so young. But my stepdad used to work. He had a full-time job. And so what we did really, my brother lives down in London. So me and my sisters really kind of like used to step in and go and look after him in the evenings. He'd stay at our houses, that type of thing. And we did the best we could to kind of like wrap him up and carry him through.
Because young people all need strong attachments to help them through trauma. So it was really good that you were able to give him that, and it probably brought him very much closer to you as well, didn't it?
Yeah, and as I say, he had a special relationship with all of us, and we'd do different things with him and all of that. But it was difficult for him. I know that.
So should we just talk? I know it's going to be possibly a bit emotional for you, but you did say you were happy to share that that he actually took his own life on his actual birthday.
Yeah, it was either his birthday or early hours of the next day.
Yeah.
And it had without going into kind of like, obviously everybody's got their stories around the kind of events leading up to Nick taking his own life. As with the majority of suicides, nobody saw it, nobody expected it. It came like a bolt from the, a devastating blow, just on another level. And I think, looking back, I heard it. I didn't hear it at the time. Now I've educated myself. I heard it. But that doesn't change, obviously, kind of going back. All I can change is help and support people in the future. So I think for me, there's two kind of very different types of suicide. So there is kind of a very planned, somebody might be planning for a long time that they are going to take their own life, and they almost have a meticulous plan of how they are going to alleviate their pain, how they're going to alleviate the pain, like what they feel that they're putting on to other people around them, their friends, their family, and all of that kind of thing. And then there is this real kind of knee-jerk, I cannot cope in this moment. I need to alleviate my pain right now, kind of approach. And Nick was in that, going through the inquest and everything is incredibly painful. you still have to go through all the legalities, which you don't do in a normal kind of death, because they have to rule out that there isn't any untoward kind of activities. So you're dealing with police coroners, the stuff that you just wouldn't expect to be dealing with when you go through that grief. But they have to make sure that there's no third party involvement, that there's nothing, it's an investigation as to the steps that led up to him taking his own life, and then the trauma for everybody. So suicide affect one person. It doesn't affect the person that took their own lives. It doesn't affect just the family. It affects the friends. It affects the community. It affects, my kids, my sister's kids, their friends, even. You know what I mean? It is just such a huge impact, and I think it is because of the sadness that we didn't do the stuff. If I'd done this, could I have done this? If I'd said this, if I'd gone round, if I'd made the call, if I'd, ifs are just.
What if it's so hard, isn't it? What if?
I remember I used to sit, like, I didn't sleep. I don't think I actually slept for weeks. You just run it. It just eat over and over again. It is the most devastating.
I think also just the other thing is that because also now you've done the training, which you're going to share with us, is the fact that you also now know, if I'd known now then what I know now, you may have been able to prevent it. That must be so tough.
It is tough. And so I'm now a suicide intervention first aider. I shared with you, I wear a badge on the back of my phone. This means that if I was in a situation where I managed to make contact with somebody who had suicidal intentions. So it may be as dramatic as, like, obviously somebody being at a train station that I felt maybe I could go and talk to, or obviously being in an emergency situation on a bridge, or that type of thing, or just in day-to-day life, if I'd observed somebody who I felt that I could go and have a conversation with and open up if I was worried about somebody. I'm equipped to be able to have those conversations. I'm not a mental health expert. I'm not, a counsellor, a coach, any of that stuff, but I have equipped myself with suicide first aid. When you do the training, you do get told at the end of it that literally the reason why you wear that badge is if you were ever in a situation where you were in a suicide intervention, the police would even stand back and let you just deal with it, because you've actually more trained than they are in suicide intervention, which is why you get the stickers for your phone to kind of use that if you need to. I found that the training was incredibly tough for me. When I went on the training, there was a real mix of people. So there wasn't actually many survivors. When you've had somebody who's died by suicide, that were kind of known as survivors of bereavement by suicide, and is an amazing charity called SOBS, which is exactly that, Survivors of Bereavement by Suicide. They're an incredible charity. They helped me out in the early days. I had a telephone conversation with a wonderful guy who'd experienced the same. His dad had taken his own life when he was younger, and he's gone back to support the charity and does some incredible work. They're amazing. It's an amazing organisation, because nobody else understands unless you have been through it. And what that gives you is meetings, phone calls, to be able to go and grieve with people who get it. And that is just invaluable, to be honest. And I do know there's, lots of some of Nick's friends or the family members went to different SOBS meetings than the ones I did, just because of location and stuff. And they said the same, that it was incredibly valuable to them to be able to kind of like navigate through the grief, if you like. So I did the training. It tended to be a lot of people, actually, like school counsellors, people working in NHS, which is great. Everybody was getting equipped with the ASSIST training, which is a worldwide renowned training. It's the same training wherever you take it in the world. And there was just me and a lovely guy called Clark, who's actually running some mental health workshops today as well. He lost his brother by suicide, and it was by no chance that we were the first people to bump into each other at the coffee counter when we went into the training, and we held each other big time through the training. Because the training's very role play led. You are right at the forefront of dealing with scenarios on phone lines, you know, like the Samaritans, of kind of that role play of what you would do if you're in that, and kind of watching what would happen, how you can navigate through the wrong thing to say, the right thing to say, and then the outcomes. And they were actually using real life scenarios, so that was pretty tough. And then you had to go through full intervention. So somebody, literally, you'd open your eyes and there'd be somebody potentially on a bridge in the room, and you'd have to be able to go through the full intervention to bring them down. And the problem that I had on day 2 was that one of the role plays was an almost identical situation to my own situation, and even with the same name, and it triggered my trauma. So it actually took me right back. It was a year ago I did the training, so it took me back 3 years, like I was there again. And I finished up in the car, a panic attack, like literally it sent me into the biggest trauma ever. And I was very blessed that my good friend Debbie Hayes does emotional freedom technique. So if you don't know what that is, it's tapping pressure points, affirmations, that type of thing. And she spent an hour in the car with me doing emotional freedom technique till I could just shift it out of my body. I wouldn't have made the afternoon had I not had that help at the lunchtime, because I went back in, and you know, when you're in that, you're still you're still there. I hadn't worked fully through it, but they said to me, you're not going to pass unless you do this afternoon. Like, you cannot just go through training. So I did manage to get through the training. I did the role plays and everything else, and I've got a picture that I shared. It was Birmingham. It took me 2.5 hours to get back from Birmingham that night, and I just couldn't I fell through the door with my certificate. I was like, I've done it. I did it.
Do you know, just talking about these trainings, because we've both done I've done the adult mental health first aid and also the youth, and you've done the youth. And I just want to maybe just flag a couple of things that you've just shared there. The first one is that sometimes it's really difficult to know what to say, isn't it? And I think even when you are with somebody who has experienced it, sometimes as friends you want to help, but you're frightened to say anything. And actually sometimes what then happens is people sit back and they don't want to say anything, and not that they're avoiding you, but they actually don't say anything. And sometimes it's actually, whether it's clumsy or not, sometimes it's good to say something, sometimes it's not. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I find it a really difficult one to help people with.
Yeah, so it is that balance of being able to sit with somebody and not say anything, which can feel really uncomfortable. And I think where mental health is concerned, sometimes we want people to speak to us. So as a first aider, with, like Kalini just mentioned there, I've done the youth training. Kalina's done far more training than I have with all of that. Is we want to open up the conversation and allow the safe space for somebody to be able to share their thoughts, their emotions, anything they want to talk about with us. But we can't fix it.
Yes,
we signpost and we can help to get support. But what tends to happen is people either come in and try and fix you and go, it's okay, or go, it's okay, and at least, which is one of the worst things. At least you've got that, at least you've got this, at least you've got the other. Whereas actually, instead of just recognizing what that thing is, whatever that is, it could be, you know, loss, it could be anxiety, it could be, you know, whatever is going on, of actually holding a safe space for that, and being able, I think, to ask those open questions that allow conversation, and being comfortable enough to be able just to sit, and not have to fix.
And I'd love to add to that I think it is creating that safe space, but also sometimes silence is also good, because that person just needs to be. And if somebody's talking and asking lots of questions. Actually, questions can be pressure. How are you feeling? Are you okay? Can I get you this? They're wanting to be well-meaning, but
Yeah.
sometimes it is really needing to dig deep into your empathy and your emotional intelligence skills, and really just being with that person and just being there for them. Because I think it's like clean listening and clean questions, and it's not coming in with any judgment. It's giving that safe space to just be there and just hear them and not give advice. It's not giving advice and not telling them, because they don't want to rationalize it. When you're suffering from traumas, you'll know yourself, it's difficult to sometimes, because of the way in which the stress triggers how it affects the brain, it does actually stop you being able to think rationally at times. So sometimes it's difficult to rationalize things.
I'm going to use the phrase white noise, and that's often described as, that whole cannot actually compute you're talking to, being talked to, of like, it's not even going to go in. But being able to release some of that, or just sit and compose, I think is really key. I think you're right. I think definitely.
And I think the other thing as well, I just wanted to touch on, just again, because I want today to be informative as well and to help people and whatever. And I think the other thing as well is that it's about boundaries. I'm a mental health first aider. I've done several psychology courses people don't know about. I've done also the adult and youth, but also what we learn is that I'm not a mental health expert. I wouldn't say I am at all. And that's what it's about. It's about having Ali G as the model, ALGEE, in mental health first aiding. But as you know, but it's not about being there to actually give advice, but it's knowing your boundaries. And it's like I have a code of ethics, which is I know if there's something I can't help somebody with, I will get them the help that they need. It's about signposting, isn't it?
Yeah, so I see very much my role of, I do speak out a lot, and I speak out around mental health awareness. I speak out about suicide prevention, and I know from my inbox of how many people contact me who have been affected, who have family members that are struggling, and they don't know what to do, and they feel that they can't talk about maybe a family member that was lost by suicide because another family member doesn't want that to be known. So the stigma still is there, very much so. And I get contacted of like, where can I go? What can I do? Can you give me some advice? And I will always signpost. And that's, I see my role very much of being able to, I can speak about it. I'm okay to talk about it. I want to talk about it. And I want people to contact me so that I can signpost them. But what I can't do is, for my own boundary, is step in and save everybody in that moment, if you like. My inbox is always open for me to be able to signpost to those right forums. And for me, like in a crisis, it is things like Hopeline, which is Papyrus over in Warrington. It is the Samaritans at that crisis level. Moving back from there are loads and loads of amazing charities. Young Minds is an incredible charity where you can get online help, resources, information, and all of that kind of stuff to help. So I think it is about those boundaries. And I think a lot of things for me are at family level, are at friends level of, suicide is preventable, and the signs are there. They might be really, really subtle signs, but they are there. And although when people die by suicide, it's very often, everybody close to them going, I had like no idea, I didn't see it. When you educate and you kind of realize how subtle they can be, they are there. So it is about looking out and listening and taking some of those conversations seriously. There's a lot of kind of misconception out there that if somebody threatens that they're going to take their own life, that actually they never will. That is actually not true. They're actually more likely to, or they're attention seeking, or, any of that kind of stuff. And, the police are there as well for welfare checks and things. If you are worried about somebody, you can ring the police. If you are concerned and you've had those conversations, you can't get to them yourself, you can totally ring the police and tell them exactly the backlog, what's happening, and go and get welfare checks for people. And they will go out and they will do a welfare check and they will signpost. that person or get them into a crisis team or if necessary. And Samaritans are a brilliant kind of platform. And I think people don't ring the Samaritans if they're worried about a friend or family member, because they feel that actually they're not in crisis, but they are in crisis for their friend, that you can totally ring a helpline and get help, get guidance of where you can signpost your friend to, or because actually living with the guilt and living with that I should have done, I could have done, I should have done, all of that, actually make the phone calls. That's what I would do.
Do you know, there is an interesting worry there, isn't there, about how some people don't want to actually contact somebody on somebody else's behalf for fear that they're actually interfering, being nosy, being, and it's none of my business. And will they be upset with me if it doesn't turn out to be true? I think I would have
just got gooses then, because you would rather than be upset with you than deal with what I had to deal with.
Exactly.
And if I had my time again, which I can't have, I know I would have acted very differently. So, and the outcome would have been different. Yeah. So that's what I would kind of go with. I think there's also a misconception that when you're having a conversation with somebody that you are significantly worried about, or even mildly worried about, that you would never mention that about taking their own life, because you might actually put that idea in their head. Whereas actually, if you are concerned about somebody and you do feel that they are, or even if you don't feel that they, because I wouldn't have said with Nick that he would have taken his own life. But now, ahead of that, I would have these conversations and open up these conversations that if you say to somebody, have you had thoughts of taking your own life? Have you had thoughts of harming yourself? Isn't going to make them go and harm themselves or take their own life. What it is going to do is it's going to open up the conversation, and it's going to allow them to feel that I don't have to climb that mountain, because for me to say I was thinking of taking my own life is that shocking. That the person I'm speaking to probably isn't even thinking I'm up there. What you're going to do is bring that conversation down. So they're going to give them that safe ear.
It's because when people are, whether they're suffering from depression or any type of problem they're struggling with, it's that feeling that they don't want to bother somebody, isn't it? And also that how do I open this conversation up? I can't say I'm thinking of taking, they actually need that person to go in and help them to tease out the information and get the information out of them, isn't it? I just want to share with you, Naomi, that we do have some lovely ladies and people who are quite a few people who've been listening. I'll just share a couple of comments. So good morning, Sue. Thank you very much indeed for listening. And in fact, Sue has shared a few other comments. She was also referring at the time to the ripple effect of your. The comment was actually at the time when you were talking about the various things that happened in your life, which was all the losses and so on. Thank you very much for sharing that, Sue, and well done as well for doing your course, which it's a massive achievement. And I don't know about you, but I found that when I did my courses, there were a lot of people it touched, and people do the course for different reasons. They sometimes do it for their own self-healing, but they also
I was just about to say it was definitely part of my healing journey.
Yeah. And then some people do it because they want to help others. Mine was to help others. But you do find that it brings up in you, I think it's a powerful thing to do whatever, because being aware and awareness of what others are going through is really powerful. Yeah. And also just Judy McKillop. So good morning, Judy.
Hi, Judy.
And Charnel Infantfield. Yeah, lovely too. Thank you very much, everybody. Naomi, are you happy to share now what you obviously said that you know with your training, you now know the signs that you wish you'd seen at the time. Can you share what those are? Because I think it might help people to understand the sort of things you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So they can be super subtle. Any kind of change. So any kind of mood change. So it could be that somebody has, I'm not a mental health expert, but if you've got somebody, who at work, family member, wherever you know them from, and they are low mood, whether they're suffering from depression or not, but low mood, and then all of a sudden that mood changes into being actually super happy all of a sudden, but quite a big mood change in that I've obviously heard a lot of stories. I've heard a lot of bereavement stories of this kind of stuff. And what can happen is if somebody is planning for a long time and in a very low place, that actually that last part can be quite a happy place because they know that they're going to alleviate their pain. So their mood shifts into happy, which can seem really sort of a bizarre thing, can't it? In that type of scenario, they might give stuff away. They might start to give away possessions, that treasured things of theirs. So they might gift people things, which might seem quite a strange thing to do. But it's almost their way of saying goodbye, of going, and they might visit people and they might kind of like start to put their plans into place if it's kind of like seen like that. So mood change. Equally, the mood change might be the other way. So it might be somebody who on the surface seems pretty together, pretty happy, all of that kind of stuff going on, and then all of a sudden they're in a trauma. So like the deep level stuff, you know, I was talking about Nick earlier, of life and soul of the party, of everything else, but actually this real dip of this trauma has happened, and like I cannot cope in the moment of whatever is going there. So that's quite two different sides of signs. So definitely mood change. If people do mention that what's the point of life, you know, that I'm feeling like I've got no hope, no future, you know, so this can come up with loss. So like right now at the moment, like we talked about at the beginning with the pandemic and the, you know, a sigh, because we're not even experiencing, and we're not even at the tip of the iceberg of the effects of the pandemic, of where this is going to take people in the future with their mental health, with the isolation, with our children, with the fact that, you know, it's not normal to socially isolate. It's not normal to walk around with masks on. It's not normal for so many people to be losing their jobs and to be losing connection and all of that thing. And it's going to take a long time for us to unfortunately see the aftermath of the mental health impact of all of this, and we are in crisis of it all. And you know I deep within want to do more work to help open up these conversations, to help in whatever capacity I can, even if I'm not at the front end of the telephone conversations on crisis teams and everything else. But there's going to be a huge need for all of it. So I think in terms of loss of hope, when people are in that hopeless state and they're making, you know, reference to there's no point to life, and feeling lost and feeling alone and feeling isolated, all of those words are really powerful words. Equally, if people are quite agitated, so it may be that they don't know what to do with themselves during the but all of this stuff can come when people aren't suicidal.
No,
so
that's right.
why it is so subtle. But that's why the conversations are so important, because unless you have those conversations, how do you know whether they are or not? You don't.
And that is the problem, isn't it? Because it is so complex, isn't it? You can't say that just because somebody is doing these things that it leads the next step. Sometimes it can be that, you know, people talk about the cry for help, where they try it and then it doesn't succeed, but did they actually want it to happen? It's that cry for help. It is so complex, isn't it? Because you want to help so much, don't you? But then but I think, to my mind, it's about erring on the side of caution and having the conversation and keeping the lines of communication open. In particular, that's why I'm so passionate about doing it with children.
And you'll know, Kalini, in the mental health model first aiding and in the suicide intervention first aid training, those questions come up right at the front of the conversation. So they're literally in like, this is who I am, this is who you are, we're here. Have you had, you know, almost like there's lots of other things we have to establish, whether they've had, you know, substance, whether they've taken anything, all of that kind of thing. But are you thinking of harming yourself? Have you had thoughts of taking your own life? They come right up there in the conversation. And because that's what opens up, I know where you're at. And, you know, I've heard, you know, people say, like, if somebody wants to kill themselves, they'll find a way to kill themselves. And that may well be true. eventually if they choose to do that, but actually very often it's preventable in the moment. And I think we talked, didn't we, about mental health first aid, that it's not about us being there to be able to fix. It is about keeping people safe for now and being able to navigate them to get specialist help that they probably can't go and get themselves because their heads are not in that place. And people are not very likely to walk up to you and say, I'm thinking of taking my own life. You know, that's just not going to happen. So it is about listening, and it is about watching the signs and taking those signs seriously, and not just going, oh, well, it's not my place to do that. It is actually going, you know what, potentially this could happen. So there are 17 suicides a day in the UK. 13 of those are men, and it's the biggest killer of men under the age of 45. Youth suicide is in growth, and actually all of the statistics over, you know, we've not even seen what the pandemic is bringing on, but it's not looking good in terms of the statistics and the way things are moving. And I think the more we talk about this stuff and the more we bring those statistics, because they're not shared in the media, and therefore people feel that they can't go and get help because they don't want to be part of that stigma. They don't want to be stigmatized. They don't want the judgment. They don't want to go such and such attention seeking again. Here they go again. They don't want all that. So we all have a role to play in making those conversations comfortable.
And to be quite honest with you, I wanted to do this day because it might be, and I just want to share with everybody that if this is bringing up for any feelings for you, please do make contact. You can contact me, Naomi, afterwards, privately, send us messages, and we will help you. This is all, you know, it's not, you know, this is all completely free support. This is not the whole idea. I do these conversations is to raise awareness. It's to help people. And I just want to flag that, like later on this afternoon, the reason why I wanted the chap on who's coming on, Mark Williams, is because he is highlighting the number of male suicides and the postpartum. He suffered from postnatal depression as a man, and that's something that's so little talked about, and he's raising awareness of. But I just think that it's so important that we do keep the conversations going, like you said. And I'm doing this thing afterwards. I'm going to set up a special group for it called Time to Talk, because I think it's important that we do have people on, and then, might be yourself as a guest. I've talked also to another lady, Irene, another lady this morning who contacted me. This has just opened up so many people who want to share their stories, but also you may not want to share your story, but you might just need the support, and you might just need a friend or somebody who is anonymous. That's the other thing. Some people don't want to talk to friends, do they, Naomi? They want to a stranger.
It is, some people find it easy to talk to strangers because they don't want the judgment, and they don't want, particularly if they feel that they are going to be judged, and that can be, like in our household, mental health, suicide, it's an open conversation. Like my girls can talk freely. My girls are 15 and 12. They can talk freely. They talk to their friends freely about mental health issues and suicide. And I'm a big believer in that. When we can, this is the change, and the change comes from being young. In adulthood, we're changing up our perceptions and the way that we were probably brought up, and that's why the stigma exists, because we were brought up that way. Whereas if we can change it with our children, then the world's going to be a very different place, isn't it? If we can open up these conversations and make it very acceptable. And I know my girls signpost like I do, because their friends know that they can go and openly talk to them about anything. And I think that's really important.
And can I just touch on one more another thing, which is about youth, because there is the statistics. I could quote you so many statistics because of the work I do about young people who are wanting. Because I have my youth group, I know about the young people who are struggling at the moment, and who the social isolation of being away from their friends. And even though they've gone back to school, they want schools to stay open because they need that social contact. But they've also
even Kalini, the loss of results. So like the GCSE, the A levels, the loss. I know with my daughter, she's taken like dance, drama, music. Normally, drama would be a production at the local theatre for her GCSE. None of that will be happening. It's all those things are all lost. They're all change, and they all trigger grief cycles.
Yeah, and I know some people, they've lost out on things like the end of year proms. I know people who finished at sort of in March, and then they missed their proms, and so they've not done the transitioning period to school. So I do know
they were expecting because of the algorithm stuff and all of that, and it's just, it's massive.
Yeah. So, and I just want to highlight it was in a few years ago, Felix Alexander was a really, really high profile case of a young man of 17 who took his own life. And he had been on the outside. The other thing I want to flag is that people can sometimes appear okay on the exterior. They're confident. They are confident. And I've actually shared in another group today my own story about bullying. But bullying can actually, it was just the little subtle things that were happening all the time that were going on for him. And eventually it was withdrawal and being stigmatized and excluded on social media by his friends. And eventually, even parents didn't know, and he took his own life at 17 through it. And it was so sad, but that is such a common occurrence for young people.
The youngest person in the UK is 10.
Yeah.
Take their own life. And it's, I know there was someone local at 13, and you just kind of, people just don't expect that. People don't think that these issues can be in your head at that age. And I think, Papyrus, the charity over in Warrington, that's actually who I did my training with. They deal with youth kind of suicide and mental health. They have Hopeline, which is a great kind of line and great resources. And there is charities locally. There's Vision here in Congleton, who help with kind of youth and young minds, actually, is a great kind of national resource. They have a helpline there, and they actually have a lot of these charities and things now have web chats, so that if you are worried about a young person or any person, that you can go on a web chat, and particularly young people, for young people as well. So, like, even if you are a child and you don't feel that, not every household has a household like mine, that my girls could come home and tell me if they were worried about a friend, because if you're not educated and you have the stigma yourself, then you're not going to allow your child to open up that conversation of, there's places like Childline that children can ring Childline if they're worried about their friend, or they can go to school and still get, and I can never say it, say it for me, please.
Anonymity.
And get support and advice. So what I would say is, if you are kind of, for people who have somebody around them that they're worried about, it can weigh very heavy to support somebody who you're worried about. And therefore you need to get support for yourself to be able to cope with your curveballs. And, that is about resilience, which we've talked about.
Yeah.
But it's not only about resilience being on your own, it's about getting those support networks for yourself so that you can navigate your way through and be the best support for that other person. Because it has this, we talked about ripples before, it has ripples effects. If somebody, it affects you, it affects your family, it affects the friends, the community, always round. So I would always say, don't try, if you are supporting somebody or you're worried about somebody, don't try and burden yourself with it and take it all on your own shoulders. Do share that responsibility. And I've been in a situation once before where I was really worried about somebody, and I shared that responsibility with the police, and the police actually said to me, Naomi, let us take this from you. And I felt the weight lift from my shoulders, because I couldn't be with my boundary and in it. I needed to share that responsibility, and that's okay. In fact, that's more than okay. It's marvelous to be able to do that.
And that's also about knowing your remit of where your boundaries are, of not just in terms of your safety, personal safety, but what and whether you are have got the toolkit and knowledge and skills and capability to actually help that person in that situation. Being their friend is actually probably more powerful than trying to fix them. And
Absolutely.
And that's what I think. So I think just to summarize in terms of what we've talked about today, I think we wanted to sort of leave a few sort of like lasting sort of key messages, and I've sort of listed it as about 8, and I know that you've got, we were both going to cover some of them, weren't we? And I think that maybe if I could cover a couple and you cover a few as well. The first one I wanted to say is that it's about don't be afraid to ask for help, isn't it? It's important to just, we talk about that phrase about, it's okay not to be okay. But actually, some people find that a difficult concept because we're so used to having that, stiff upper lip and sort of, you don't want the world to know you've got problems. You've got this image of yourself that you want to portray to the world. Social media is partly to blame, but actually it's sometimes about just being able to say, look, I'm not okay. But then you do need the friends there and other people, anonymous people who don't know you, that you're able to say, I'm not okay, I need some support. So that's the first thing, is don't be afraid to ask for help. And then there were the interventions, and then we've talked about, do you want to take it to share a few of these as well?
Yeah, I think it is just about don't be afraid to open up conversations from me, of don't be afraid to have difficult conversations, rather than kind of shying away or walking on eggshells and kind of going around the conversation. I know even in role play, and even, I have these open conversations now, but it felt really, really uncomfortable when I first started to kind of, you don't want to ask people those questions because it feels awkward. It feels uncomfortable because it's not the way that we've been conditioned. We have been conditioned into, we are okay, haven't we? Of like, let's just pretend that we're fabulous and that all of this is going on in our world, just what Kalini said. So I think the more that we do open up the conversations, the better place will be.
So I'm just going to summarize by saying I think it's don't be afraid to ask for help and have the conversations. There are interventions out there and people who can help you. There really are. And it is about seeking the help or helping the person who needs the help to get those interventions and doing
make those calls. If you're worried about somebody, ring the helplines, get the help. There's so much help and support out there. It's just knowing the right place to go. So do pick up those phones and don't feel that you're taking someone's time up that is at suicidal level, if you like. Because you're ringing, you equally are playing your role in that. Yeah.
And I think the other thing is to just remember, all of us, that, mental health is a continuum. That's the first thing we learn, in fact, when we do the mental health first aid training. And it is a continuum, and we're all on it at some point. We may be at the good, the spectrum where we're above the line. This is something we learn. But some things happen, and we do get those curveballs in our life, which can tip us over and we feel anxious. It can then be chronic stress or whatever, and it can take you along that line to where you're needing support. We're all on it. So it's about maybe making sure that you also understand that recovery is possible.
Yeah.
I suffered, I haven't shared my story, but I suffered tremendous bullying as a child and as an adult, and it affected me, but I've done my own training like you have, and it's helped me in the interventions I took to actually do the healing so that I can help other people. And we all have our own story to play, don't we?
Absolutely. And I think everybody suffers with mental health. We all have mental health, and we need to address mental health in the same way that we address physical health. So if we break a leg or injure an arm, we go and we've got a physical injury and we can see it and we can get sympathy of whatever that is. With mental health, because it's going on in our head and other people can't see it, it doesn't make it any less real. And I think the more that we start talking about our health as a whole instead of mental health, mental health, physical health, it's the same thing. And I know this year's theme for Mental Health Day is World Mental Health Day is mental health for all. And we are all responsible for our own mental health, for getting ourselves help and support, and for building our own resilience in a happy, and getting ourselves that help and support if we feel that we need it, or leaning on somebody that can help us to get that help and support as well. So we are we're all
And
there.
then just you've mentioned the word resilience. We touched on it earlier, and I think it's important also everybody to understand that resilience is your bounce back ability and your ability to actually cope with adversity. And it is about also understanding what those triggers are. Because if you can also tackle and find the ways, and this is where kindness and self-care comes in, if you can find those ways to actually tackle the things early on, they don't then get so big, and that they become like maybe a generalized anxiety disorder or something where somebody's starting to self-harm or whatever it is. It is, if you can actually find the tools and techniques to look after yourself, self-love, self-care, and just, you know, keeping yourself healthy and happier. Obviously life is not straight, it's all up and down. If you can actually build your confidence, your resilience, and your mindset, it's the reframing as well, the reframing tools to back your mindset. All of these things go together, and that's what and so it's, if you can do all that, you can actually stop and keep yourself at that end of the continuum where you are coping. And it's when your stress container gets too full and you end up not being able to cope with everything, and it just goes over the top. And
I think it's totally like that. You know, like in terms of mindset reframing tools and kind of working with your own stuff, like 10 years ago, I hadn't even heard of like mindfulness or meditation or anything at all, where it's part of my daily practice because I'm responsible for my own mindset. And I do meditate on a daily basis, whereas 10 years ago I'd have gone like, that's really weird. You know, meditation, mindfulness, I do colouring in, affirmation cards, journaling, and, you know, having a self-care doesn't have to be that you've booked yourself in a spa. I mean, totally don't get me wrong, it can, but it can be the small things, can't it? Like buying yourself your favourite bunch of flowers, or like I've got a little star I have on my desk, my little wand, of actually putting yourself a post-it note on your mirror which says I am enough, or today's going to be amazing. They can be really, really small things. That is all self-care. It's all looking after your own mindset. So it doesn't have to be kind of self-care can kind of sometimes get confused that I've got to go and have
I know it's not about having your hair done or your nails done or whatever. It is literally, it's just that time out. It can be just, even I take power naps, and I know sometimes just, you know, it's just that escape, going to nature, doing all of those things that are self-care. So Naomi, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you. I mean, we've got a few other comments. Jane Barker, thank you very much for joining us. Naomi, lovely to see you this morning and hear your story. Really admire how you've overcome such trauma and have turned it around to help others.
Thank you,
and
Jane.
I think that is, thank you. It's really good to share this because it does help other people, doesn't it? Leah Luck, thank you very much, Lee. And I know that there are other people who've been listening because I've been watching, and I really appreciate all your input, everybody. I think what would be really good actually is if we would share afterwards, Naomi, some links to some of these charities and support helplines in the chat afterwards. We'll put a document together maybe with all the various support things that people can access, because I think it's important, having opened up the conversation now, to keep it going and for people to know that there is help out there, as we've suggested. So I will definitely be, but please guys, if you can share this as well, let other people, you know, keep the conversation going. I'm also going to share a link to this Time to Talk group that I'm doing, which allows people to come on and share things. It doesn't have to be just specialists coming on. It could be sharing your story, because your story could be the thing that actually helps somebody else. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed that. It's been very emotional, and really admire your courage, Naomi, and also, you know,
tissues.
I know we didn't need to use the tissues. I've got mine ready. I did have to wipe my eyes a couple of times. But you know, sending lots of love. Anyway, I wish I could give you a virtual hug, but that's what the power of StreamYard is. Thank you, everybody, and it's been lovely, and speak to you all soon. Take care.
Thanks.